Namaskar. My name is Surendranath. I'm a software engineer from Chennai. I have a regular job and I do this as a matter of interest and just for my own knowledge, and I am trying to share what I have found with other people. So I'll just go quickly into the slide deck itself. The first thing where I want to start out, I'll just tell you what I'm going to say. I will just start with a small description of what the FCRA Act is all about. Just give a few facts and figures on how much money is coming in, how many organizations are actually there, and what they are taking this money for, and what they are actually doing with this money. And then I want to do that pretty little quickly, run through that pretty quickly, because a lot of people here already have a rough idea of the nature of the problem. And I want to move it quickly to the nature of solutions that we need to seek and discuss more about the solutions that we need. So there were regulations on foreign contributions for various purposes for quite some time, since 1976. But in 2010, a fresh act was brought through to ensure that there is a further set of regulations and ensure that the contributions are streamlined and utilized for a proper purpose. More than that, the intention was to ensure that the government actually gathers some data about what is actually happening. So they made a few things mandatory, which is that the registration or the ability to accept foreign contributions, the registration for that and the authorization should be renewed every 5 years. And on a regular basis, on an annual basis, the contributions should be disclosed to the government. And fortunately, the Ministry of Home Affairs decided to share this information on their public website, which is a lot of the data here is going to be based upon data which is shared on the FCRA site of the run by the Ministry of Home Affairs, Government of India. And there were also some fresh restrictions placed on what the money could be used for and who could be receiving this money. So there are certain purposes, restricted set of purposes for which this money can be obtained, which is research, education, training, awareness camps, rehabilitation of victims, rehabilitation of people who are affected in natural disasters, rehabilitation of AIDS patients, and so on. But a lot of this money is actually going towards things like awareness camps, training, research, where very often the outcomes can be pretty amorphous and where the outcomes need not be very transparent. Then there are restrictions on who can obtain this money. It cannot be used for conversion. It is very explicitly said that this money cannot be used as enticement for conversion. It cannot be diverted to any organization which is not registered as an FCRA entity. So if I have registration, if I have got permission to utilize funds, I should not transfer the money which I've got from abroad to another organization which has not taken the authorization for utilizing these funds. It's not allowed for government servants are not allowed to accept this money. Election candidates, people in the media, legislators, people involved in the judiciary are not allowed to accept this money. But there are people who run organizations. They have been in the past. They have been government servants. They themselves have actually, while they were in government service or while they were commissioned on specific tasks for the government, they have accepted funds through their registered trust. So if you are a trustee of an organization and that organization is receiving funds, it is theoretically not against the law if you are a government servant or a member of the judiciary or whatever. There are the recipients. So I spoke about the recipients, who have to renew registration and take registration and so on. There is another new portal which the government has brought through. It's managed by the Niti Aayog. It is called the Darpan portal. Darpan portal is common to all NGOs, whether they are accepting foreign contributions or not accepting foreign contributions. They have to register themselves from the Darpan portal, and it's still not been mandatory yet. And you need to disclose only amounts which you have received about 20,000 rupees in a year. It could be broken up into multiple payments, multiple remittances, but overall, in a year, if you have received more than 20,000 rupees from abroad, whether it is from an individual or an organization, you are required to disclose it. You are required to disclose for what purpose you have taken that money, and you are also required to disclose out of the money that you have collected, what purpose you have spent it on. So, a quick overview of the number of entities which are registered as registered FCRA NGOs. So, in 2013-2014, 40,000 odd organizations were registered as FCRA NGOs. In 2017-2018, there are only 22,000 odd organizations which are registered with the FCRA Regulation Act. However, why did they lose registration? 8,900 odd organizations did not file a single return from the year the FCRA Act came into force. So they never submitted a return, and since they never submitted a return, they were also given 1 full year to comply with the conditions of the Act. In spite of that, they did not comply with the conditions of the Act, and hence their registration was cancelled. Many of them, notices were sent from the Ministry of Home Affairs to the registered address. They did not reply to the notice from the Ministry of Home Affairs, which means they are not willing to cooperate with the government and not willing to comply with the provisions of the Act. Another 11,000 were deemed to have ceased operations because they were supposed to have applied for renewal in 2015. They did not apply. They were given 1 more year to apply for renewal. They still did not apply. Therefore, the government assumed that they did not need the money, and therefore they must not be in operation. Therefore, they did not need the money. Therefore, their registration was cancelled. Now, it just means that the people whose registrations were cancelled, the vast majority of entities whose registrations were cancelled were probably not active at all. They were probably not doing anything at all. So these organizations, 20,000 odd organizations which are actually active, are the ones who have been receiving and who will continue to receive. And there is therefore, from the point of view of registration, it has not significantly, the regulation has not significantly impacted those who are really active all along. Now, 50,000 odd NGOs are registered in Darpan. Out of that, only 5,000 odd of these 50,000 odd NGOs are actually FCRA registered also. Therefore, we have information about the publicly available information about trustees and the structure of the trust only for 5,000 odd NGOs. Some 17,000 odd NGOs. We don't really have official information which is registered with the Government of India as to who the trustees are and who are the office bearers and what is the structure of the trust. It's not publicly available. It's somewhere there with the government. Quarterly returns the NGOs are required to submit quarterly returns, but they can publish it on their own website. It need not be published with the Ministry of Home Affairs. So that's a short picture of what these NGOs are doing. And this is a quick graph of how much money these organizations have been receiving. The graph starts in 1994-95, from when data starts coming in. From roughly around 2,000 crores per year in 1994-95 till the latest year for which we have full data, which is 2016-2017 financial year, the amount of money has grown exponentially. As of 2016-2017, the official information released by the Government of India is 18,000 crores in 2016-2017 financial year alone. The cash position was, there was a format which was in force till 2012, and based on that format, we were able to get data about the cash position, which is cash and cash equivalents, which is money in savings banks and money in fixed deposits in banks. And this amount was roughly 10,000 crore rupees in 2012. Based on the data that we analyzed, rough data that we analyzed for the latest year, and out of that, based on, there is roughly 2,500 crores, rough amount, I'm just giving you rough figures, 2,500 crores worth of money in financial year 2016-2017 has been received from savings bank account interest and fixed deposit interest. So if you take an 8% average interest rate, this roughly comes to, I mean, this is a quite a high percent. 8% average interest rate is a quite high percent that I'm putting in. But if you take it at 8%, roughly the cash hoard is 30,000 crore rupees, which are sitting with in bank accounts and fixed deposits of some 20,000 odd organizations across the country. To give an idea, the annual input income, the annual inward remittance is about 1.5 times the size of the entire Indian film industry, all languages. It is 2 times the ISRO budget. Before 2013-2014, there's just a errata. Before 2013-2014, intra-India fund flows were also double counted. So we can discount the numbers before 2013-2014 by about 10% roughly. So which means the number that I want to leave you with is, in spite of the best efforts of this current government, based on the law that we have, based on the regulations and the law that we have, which is the FCRA Act of 2010, and based on best effort implementation, and there's still the money is coming in. It's in fact flowing in, and it's more than ever. Cash and land banks, again, I just put in this number for interest on savings bank accounts. We had, there was a format by which we could do bulk extraction and analysis from the public website. The format changed, but it's changing back. So in 3-4 months, we ought to have updated data. But right now I have data as of 2012. While I spoke to you about the savings bank and fixed deposits, they've also been spending a lot of money in buying land. As you can see, there's an average of 50 crore rupees every year across India, which they have spent in purchasing land. And in 2006 to 2012, they have spent about 200 odd crores in purchasing land. This is not even construction of buildings, mind you, just purchase of land. What all can the government do? The government can penalize in 3 ways. They can suspend the license temporarily. They can cancel the FCRA registration so that they cannot receive any foreign remittance. They can put them in prior permission category, in which case each payment has to be reviewed, which is more or less the same as cancelling the registration. And so there is another tool which is called the PFMS tool, and an online analytical tool by which they integrate with the bank accounts. So FCRA entities are required, if they are accepting remittances in a particular account, that account should be in one of 32 banks which has a core banking system and which is integrated with the PFMS. And therefore, real-time data about fund inflow is already available with the Ministry of Home Affairs. This was launched last year. So it's not lack of data, we have data with the government. Now the interesting part. The religious profile of who are the recipients and the volumes. On paper, about 20% of the organizations are explicitly Christian in nature. On paper, about 30% of the fund inflow is explicitly to Christian organizations. But having said that, the donors, if you go back and look at who the donors are, it is not necessary that the donors are secular. The donors can either be aligned with some religious denomination abroad, and the donor can be aligned with a particular foreign government also. In a few rare cases, the donors are aligned with some foreign governments. Therefore, there is another thing that 2 entities, one which is explicitly secular, one which is openly religious, can share the same premises. For example, you can have a priest in a particular religious order, and that priest will have a organization, and that priest will be the office bearer in an organization which is declared as a social and economical organization. Therefore, if you take this number and do a dipstick survey, based on the data that we analyzed, a limited amount of data that we analyzed, based on the names and who they are and where their offices are located, we roughly estimate that more than 70% of this inflow is for Christian organizations or Christian purposes. About 10% of the inflow is from foreign governments, either some agency, aid agency, or some agency associated with the foreign government. So before I move on to the solution, I presume that a lot of the people here know the information that we have. A lot of this money is may not actually go towards running orphanages and schools and hospitals and missions and so on. A lot of the money is actually going in towards interventions in different parts of our society. A lot of the interventions are directly in actions that the government must take. For example, if I take about 20 to 30 controversial public interest litigations, your Jallikattu, your Kambala racing, or if you take your Devdasi, there was an additional Devdasi ban was put in 86 in Andhra Pradesh, in the undivided Andhra Pradesh. Further, after that, recently there were some additional regulations sought. Then there was a ban sought on, there was public interest litigation filed against the ban on cow slaughter. Himachal Pradesh came out with a legislation on prevention of religious conversion. Himachal Pradesh High Court was moved by organizations which sought to overturn this legislation, and these organizations were funded by religious organizations abroad. If you take legislative action, for example, the NAC, which was actually running the government and bringing in a lot of the legislation, a lot of the major legislations of the UPA governments, 2004 to 2014, were actually drafted by the NAC, and a good proportion of the members of the NAC, starting from the chairperson herself, were office bearers in assorted NGOs which were receiving funds from abroad. And the people behind the Right to Education Act and the thankfully stillborn communal violence bill, all of them, a good portion of them were members, office bearers of FCRA NGOs. Then again, if we take the executive portions of the government itself, there are services that the government provides, like childline services is one. For example, childline services you can find in all these significant places where you can find children are vulnerable, your melas and railway stations and places like that. A good number of these childline services have been outsourced to NGOs, and these NGOs are foreign funded. So essentially, what we are trying to get at here is that the money may be coming from individuals abroad or from organizations abroad, which may have very good intentions. But what it is being used for here is actually for a lot of intervention in things that our civil society should be concerned with, in things that our government should be doing, various arms of our government should be doing. I'm not even going into the so-called fourth pillar of democracy, which is the press, because that's I'll end up talking too much. But for other parts of the government, let the press be what it is. But for other parts of the government, this is critical to keeping our national sovereignty, that so many of these interventions in functions of our government, so many of these interventions in our legislative processes, in our judicial processes, not be done by organizations which are receiving money from abroad, simply because, as the saying goes, who pays the piper calls the tune. And as again our own saying goes, dharmasya moolam artha, adharmasya moolam api artha iva. So for a lot of adharmic activities also, it is only this money which is coming from abroad which is behind this adharmic activity. So there are so many things that we can do. We can actually put more regulatory norms on disclosure. We can put more regulatory norms on what activities can be done, what activities cannot be done. So there are two ways we can look at it. We can rely on the capability of the Indian state to harass and harass these people into stopping what they are doing. Or we can take the high road and the hammer approach and just ban and say that we do not want to receive any foreign contributions for any charitable, for any non-profit purpose from abroad, except of course it is from people with a cultural connect to India, which could be the overseas citizens of India, persons of Indian origin, and so on. So that is the solution that we are placing here. First of all, the remittances that we are getting is 18,000 crores, out of which 15,500 crores was fresh money, 2,500 crores is interest accrued on money which has been put in savings banks, etc. So we are a US $2 trillion economy, and this is 2 billion, which is not even 1% of our economy, and we don't really need this money. When we can refuse aid in case of disasters and emergencies and manage it ourselves from our own funds, it's quite possible that we can, take care of our orphanages and run schools and run, medical institutions and so on from money which our people make here in India. And in terms of CSR, CSR, one of the last numbers was that we were getting CSR money to the tune of 5,000 crores a year. And this money is only going to increase with time as the CSR movement gains momentum. It's just up to us to ensure that the CSR money is routed to the right kind of people and put in the regulations in place and not accept foreign funding from abroad. So what we can allow is personal remittances from PIO, OCI or NRIs from abroad from their own personal funds after paying tax in their host nation, and which can be routed towards a limited set of objectives, which could be cultural preservation, preservation of ancient knowledge systems, and so on. So this is a solution that we are proposing. There were other solutions that we wanted to discuss and throw open in terms of additional regulation and so on. So we could probably take that if this is not acceptable and if we do not get quorum on this particular subject. So I'm finishing, actually I was given 30 minutes. I'm finishing in 23 minutes so that we get some time, and some of the cumulative wisdom of all the people here can be harnessed to better effect. Thank you very much.